Um, let's go to round 4.
Let's see, now, what have I got here? Oh, yes, this is a sestina. This is about as formal gets. And some people hate it because it works the way a die works. You know how there are 6 sides to the die
Yes.
and they move the same way, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and so forth. It's 6 actually, 6. And that's why this is a sestina, a 6-line thing. And it uses the same end words in every stanza, but they move. They move in a certain way. It has to be followed. And the last stanza is only 3 lines long, not 6, and it has to use the same words, the middle and the end of each line. And I love it because I like crazy things, and this is about as crazy as poetry gets.
Okay.
People in home movies. People in home movies are always turning or lurching too close, passing through and out of focus, big bleared faces, all patches and shards of color. We want to tell them, stop, hold still a while, against that background of shifting leaves and water, but they keep moving over the edge like doomed sailors, moving too fast for any lens, their backs turning as the film twitches over sky, gates, ground. Anonymous pastures, a road splayed out, looped in again. By now we've lost them, their absence as disfiguring as patches. Memory at our age is bits and patches. Whose faces were those? Where were they, moving under those blurred clouds, laughing? Behind them, what sea was that? And when did all that turning foam unfold itself over the sand and out again? Names, features, fragments litter the ground we flicker across, as in a burial ground, graves of old friends standing out like patches. We know who they were, but time rubs out the writing, and the camera moving through past weathers is too hurried, turning our sudden decades too close to save them. We would need to reel backward to pursue them, make ourselves as we were, strip from the ground these crops, coaxed from ourselves by the turning of each sun, back to bare soil and patches of early light, before God's rain, moving among small roots, woke us and tricked us out. And would it be worth it, after all, out of a moment's regret, to run toward them and buy them back at the price of ourselves? Moving weightless out of ourselves into heart's ground, the future discarded like old clothes, full of patches, and the child in us naked, dancing and turning. People in home movies want out. They hide underground or behind new faces that cover them like patches. They age, they change, they keep moving, past or returning.
Wow.
And people
That
think it ought to
is
be impossible, but it isn't. It's one of the most fun things that you can do with a piece of writing.
really.
You know what I always thought if I ever were to write another essay about your work, I think I would focus on your use of all of your ekphrastic poems that have to do with photography.
Oh,
And this one would figure largely in it as something quite different because photographs stand still.
mm,
And this so does not stand still. Look at your repetens. Your repetens, you have two of your repetens are turning and
Verbs. Yeah.
and moving. And then look what happens. Look what happens in the rest of the poem. You have lurching. You have stop, hold still a while, shifting leaves and water. The film twitches, their absence disfiguring. They're laughing. When did all that turning foam unfold itself? The litter, we flicker, too hurried, reel backward to pursue them, run toward them, the future discarded, dancing, the whole, there's all motion. Everything's nothing, you can't pin anything down ever. And it's all motion. And it's like saying, well, because it's such a poem about mortality and about the passage of time. It is about time. It's the time as a river thing that's going on, and it does not stop. It does not stop. And the people in the old homes, the people in this movie, they want out of it because they hide underground. Just think of that. They hide underground to get rid of this turbulence that they're in. Or they hide behind these faces that look so much like they did, their grandchildren. They're hiding behind their grandchildren's faces. It's quite a, it's quite. Yeah, I can just see it being because if you really look through Rhina's work, you see so many ekphrastic poems about photography because they're poems about memory, of course, but they're never quite. It's not just simple. Memory's never simple.
No,
But in this one, the pictures won't stand still.
no,
Yes.
no, they don't. They don't. They haunt you. This is a kind of haunting.
Mhm.
Well, I guess the echo of Eliot is intentional, right? In the next to the last stanza.
Yes.
Would it be worth it after all?
After all, yes, I stole that line.
Well,
You have to know when to steal.
Yes, you do.
well, to me, the point about the line is not so much whether you steal it as how you answer it. And it seems that you're implying that that we not only can't go back, but we shouldn't want to go back. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
but you do want to go back.
You want to, but you know it's impossible, so you make yourself not want to.
Right.
No, Rena, you did exactly that in the one where your father comes on his boat
Yes.
and you're on the shore
Mhm.
and you want so badly to go into that boat.
Yes.
And right as you're going to go into the boat, you hear some
Yeah, my
some of your children are in the background, because it's a dream and they're waking up and they're waking you up and say, no, I need to be here. You turn around at the last second when instead of you're tempted to go back to that other place,
Yes,
but you turn around.
that's right.
Well, I mean, this is uh, Orpheus and Eurydice
Yeah.
Yes.
too.
And you
It's
write
like,
about Orpheus and Eurydice as an image in my poetry too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah,
Because, if when we have losses that are really, really painful, really profound losses that you find it very hard to live without, you want to be gone. But then you say you have a second thought and you say, no, I can't do that. I can't do that because I have a place in the world. I've been assigned a place in the world. I have homework to do. I can't stay here and not do my homework.
right.
And that,
Well, that not every personality views life that way, Rena. But I know what you're saying, and I mean, I feel the same way. If you're also, if you've been given a gift, then your job is to put it to work. You know,
your job is to be around for whatever you can do that is good for somebody else.
yeah,
If whatever it is, what you have a job, you do. There's always homework.
yes,
If you're at home.
Yes, that's right. And you have to stay
yes,
home to do it. Um, and the dead themselves don't want to come back. They don't want you to go and find them and hold them out of that box
Yeah,
that
because
the girl gets cut up in.
yeah, Thornton Wilder did that with his Our Town play.
Yeah.
You go, they
They
don't
don't want to
back,
go
yeah.
back. No, they don't.
yeah,
Why should we be cowardly enough to force them into wanting to go back?
Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Well, that's a kind of selfishness.
Yes,
Yeah,
that's right.
Wow. Um,
Have you ever tried a sestina?
Not a Sistina. You know, I'm not kind of a form worshiper. I mean, I wrote a villanelle. That's as fancy as I've gotten.
Oh, Villanello, wonderful. What you do with those two lines, first and third. Oh,
Yeah, I enjoyed it. I have to admit, I did enjoy it.
well,
Now,
I have a confession to make. You're a serious poet. I I like play. I do a lot of playing. You do a lot of, you're an intellectual. You do a lot of thinking, and it gets into the poetry beautifully, and it works. But I like to skip rope. I like the skipping of rope, and I like playing potsy with the little stone on the, the drawing on the sidewalk. I grew up playing with poetry because my grandmother was a poet. And when I
uh,
heard her, I thought, oh my goodness, what are the grown-ups doing? They're crazy, but they're having so much fun. That's what I want to do. I really took it that way.
wow.
And I thought that the dancing was all that there was to it. But it took me experience to learn that it was not. It's worth more, it does more. But you have to play with it. You have to play
Yeah.
with it because otherwise the reader's not going to have as much fun as you are.
So when you engage with some of these more quote unquote challenging forms, um, it's like, uh, well, you're calling it play. Now, with other people, like Stephen Sondheim, for instance, talking about setting lyrics, says that he looks at it like it's a puzzle,
Uh-huh, uh-huh. That's play too.
which is a different kind of play.
Yeah.
Um, and so you actually derive some enjoyment from the engaging with the form itself.
Yes, I do. I
So
do.
when you sit down, you say, you're going to, at what point do you know it's going to be a sestina?
I don't know anything about it until it tells me something. It's a voice inside my head, and I don't even know what language it wants me to use, much less what I want it to be about. I have no idea what
Wow.
it's about. But eventually, what the first thing that happens to me with a poetry coming and pulling at my sleeve is that there's something that goes, or maybe I hear
Yeah.
it's the drum beat I'm listening for. And eventually the drum beat goes away and it becomes syllables. And then the syllables become language. And I say, oh, it wants to be in Spanish or it wants to be in English. And then after I've listened to enough of what goes on, it takes the place of the drum beats. Then I know what the poem, what the voice is telling me to do.
So that's what I want to focus on just a little bit further because the process that you're describing is familiar to me, no matter what shape the poem eventually takes. But in one of these forms where um, do you know after a line? Do you know after two lines? With a sestina, you kind of do you know after six lines? How does it happen with these tighter forms that are making immediate demands?
I can hear it because it's telling me so in my head. It's telling me
So,
the language. It's telling me the second thing it's telling me is what kind of dance I want to do to it because
yep.
that's the meter. What are you going to dance to with this? And then finally it tells me what it is it wants to say. But that's very far off in the distance.
So you never intellectualize it before you begin.
No,
You don't say, now I'm going to write a sonnet or now I'm
no,
going to, yeah.
no. I don't
That
know
makes
what.
sense to me. I mean, I never do that either. I'm following what you're saying. It's similar to, to what I do, except that I haven't heard, oh, this is,
Well, you're a musician. You have the music coming to you. The voice comes to you. You have no
yes,
problem.
yes, yeah. But I mean, I'm not sure when I know in a form what the form is, if it's poetic. You know what I mean? If I write a line, after the first line, I don't know this is going to be a sonnet or this is
Oh, neither do I. Not after
going to
the.
be in 3-line stanzas or 4-line stanzas. Those are things that come to me as I'm working. So, I mean,
Let me
I
tell you.
asked the question. I understand there isn't any clear answer, but I was just curious whether.
It
Um,
depends. It depends on what dance you start doing. When you start dancing to it, you say, "Oh, this thing wants to be a sestina,
okay.
or it wants to be a sonnet."
Yep.
A nice, polite box, a box of 14,
We
14 this way and 12 this way.
Yep. Yep.
And it's a game. It's a game. No, even if it's something that I'm something that I'm weeping over, it is a game,
Yep.
and it helps you to survive.
Well, see, for me, when I think about music, about inspiration, musical inspiration, um, we say we're playing.
Yeah.
It's always. I mean, the work is playing is the work.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
It's not an accident that it's the same word.
Right. Yeah. I feel that too.
Yeah.
I just wanted to try to pin you down a little bit. You know, you're like a handful of mercury. You put your finger down and it jumps in every direction away from you, and then it reassembles, and it's tempting. You think you can do something with it, but no.
I'll tell you a secret. It's because there's a child inside this 92-year-old, 92-year-old.
Well,
Don't tell. Don't tell.
that's great. Um, okay, so we're in round 4, sir.
Oh, it's round 4. Oh, yes, my turn. I forgot. Okay. Yeah. So here we go. Next one I'm going to do is now this one too is a bit of a gift of a dream. But this one, believe it or not, is a poem written in the dream, and it has a very, very strange form. It rhymes A B like any quatrain might, but well, no, it doesn't really. It just rhymes A B
XB.
XB. Yeah. So, but the thing is that the first two lines are trimeter, and then the next two are dimeter. So it always there's a falling off in every single one of these. And this
Okay.
was I dreamed myself writing this poem, and then all I had to do when I woke up is I had to first I had to make peace with this weird. I tried to get rid of this because it's too weird of a form, but it wouldn't come out in any other form. So I
Yep.
stayed with it. And then I just chopped away because this poem would have been 3 times as long. So it's called Talking All Night. It's for this person RPE has the initials RPE. I wonder who that could be.
Who could you be speaking of? Whom? Yes. Go ahead.
I asked my friend Talking All Night. I asked my friend, the poet, how she was getting by. Work and tears, came her reply. And listening, she added, in silence, to be sure. I listen closer now than before. It is a lot like reading, a thing I loved to do. What book felt like first love to you? It was in French, I said, a book my mother kept to read to us until we slept. Not a children's book, an excerpt from Hugo or Maupassant, with etchings, though, in which, from room to room, as gentle as a mouse, the family bear wandered the house. The bear saw everything and knew their secrets well, but couldn't speak, so couldn't tell. The grateful children fed him crepes, Suzette, and tarts, for his mute love had warmed their hearts. I thrilled to see that book in the case beside my bed. to hear again things left unsaid. And I'd imagine what the bear kept to himself, stories to fill another shelf. Although my tale continued longer than it should, my friend's clear eyes pronounced it good. As in a dream that takes for granted the absurd, she'd understood my every word. Long will I remember, if memory is kind, how warm she made those rooms of mind.
Yeah. Well,
So,
back to imagination. Wow. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
yeah, I mean, and it certainly is imagination, because I'll tell you one thing, my mother was not reading Maupassant and Hugo to us. She, she, my mother, my mother would tell you, and she often did say so, she never read a single book in her entire life. Not one, not one. It hurt her eyes, so she did not, no, I don't know, but in the dream she did.
Well,
In the
what
dream
more
she
do you-
did, and that's right, So
Plato said it. Poets are liars.
yeah,
It's our business.
it's our business, yeah.
So, did she not read your own books?
Well, she died when I was 14, so I didn't hope
Oh,
those poems.
oh. Well,
I,
that would have been an
I
interesting thing
love
to
the
see.
poem.
What's that? Yeah, but you know
No,
what? You know what? She actually was a writer. She actually contributed to this thing that was in the Boston Globe, very important thing. It was called Confidential Chat.
Mhm.
And you would send your recipes in and you would talk about them. And, much of this we're doing right here,
I'm
people,
sure I read it because we used to get the Globe. I mean,
yeah,
I read it.
but everyone had their own name. So you would never be able to go back and find what she wrote because she had her secret name and we didn't know what it was.
Did you save them?
No,
Oh,
she
bless.
didn't either, no. Yeah.
Well, you could find them now. I'm sure it's been
Yeah.
the
But you
Globe
have
is
to
from
know what her
those.
name was, though, because you don't go by your own name on those things.
Right, I understand. And you would not be able to tell from the matter or the style.
Maybe.
I wonder.
Mhm.
I wonder. No, where I was going with it, had she survived to the point of being able to read your own books, it would be an interesting transposition of the role of the bear, where the bear knows but does not say. And clearly, as a child, you were drawn to all those books the bear could have written
Right.
that it was unable to to impart. So you could rescue those stories. I mean, as a child, it seems to me you wanted to be the one to break to go in there and get those stories out. And this is the impulse, to write them. And then you could write them, and then your mother was the person who did not read. Here's her chance to. I always say, people say, um, I always say, if you want to get to know me, just listen to my songs or read my. It's all there. I'm not hiding anything. It's a very concentrated, quick way to learn about the personality. That's what. I mean, there's no quicker way to learn about someone than learning about a poet, because you get this extremely compressed version of their point of view in every poem. It's the most, I had occasion to explain how I got into reading poetry. I submitted to some place where they said, instead of giving us a bio, write a paragraph about how you first got interested in poetry.
Hmm.
And I said, well, when I was a child, there were no bookstores in my hometown. I did get into the library later, but there were no bookstores. But there was a department store called Mitchell's that downstairs in the basement, next to the appliances, had a section for books.
Wow.
And when my mother would go to shop in this store, she would say, well, you can go downstairs and look around down there. I'll be upstairs doing what I'm doing. She knew I was safe. And so I would go down there, and I knew that she wasn't going to shop forever. So I wanted to be touched by the most minds, the most people I could. And after a while, I was drawn to the poetry section because I could, in a half an hour, I was look at how much variety you could get. And so I would always look for names that I didn't know and read something by, and that was my lifelong habit, was to go to a poetry section and take out books by poets whose names I did not recognize and read some. And I found a lot of people that became favorites of mine that way. But I also got a very good cross section because it was purely predicated on my ignorance was the starting point. And but that's what I wanted. I want, 5 minutes, I can get to know, what is Edna St. Vincent Millay all about, and then you would read something. So anyway, I don't know why I got off on that tangent, but that's where it started for me with poetry in particular.
Yeah, well, you're answering the question.
Yeah.
What book felt like first love to you?
Well, there's two answers. The first one, the first one was a book that was written not long after Einstein died, called The Universe and Dr. Einstein. Because this is the scientist in me. I was completely possessed by his theories. And
was this a picture book?
No, it was a regular book, but it was comprehensible. It was for lay people. It wasn't it didn't have math in it. And so that appealed to me. And then really it was a little bit later, but it was Frost in the Clearing, which came out in 1963, I think. And so I was 15, but that's really what crystallized things for me. Because I had read anthologies and stuff before, but I don't think I'd read an entire book by a single poet. And I read, at the same time that I read In the Clearing, I read Carl Sandburg's Honey and Salt. And but I was much more taken by Frost. In the case of Honey and Salt, the hardcover edition of it had the most peculiar odor of any book I've ever experienced.
Honey and Salt. Huh?
Well, that's what, in my mind, I thought this must be what it smells like. But it's the only book I've ever bought that had an olfactory appeal.
Oh.
But it still wasn't enough to get me off of In the Clearing. So anyway,
you were hooked on poetry right from the beginning.
Yeah, it's funny because I wanted to be a scientist, but I was into poetry and I was memorizing poems when I was 9 or 10, and I was reading Shakespeare when I was about to turn 10. So I was completely immersed in that language. But I didn't know it. I thought, well, this is just what you do. But what I really want to do is to understand the secrets of the
universe,
particle interactions in the nucleus. And I would still like to know that, but I don't. Anyway, so well, let me go to my next to last offering here, and this is another one that's based on romantic relationships, except in this case, it's not just one, it's a whole range of them. And so it's an extended metaphor with multiple illustrations. And it's called He Is as the Wind. And as you'll see in this poem, the role that I play stanza by stanza, they're short 3-line stanzas, is one or another variety of moving air phenomena. He is as the wind. To one, I was a source of agitation in aspen leaves beyond her window glass, insistent whispers, keeping her from sleep. Another felt me rising suddenly under darkened skies, signaling rain, not to be trusted with one open shutter. To this one, Twister, unpredictable, which drives her underground, its path a risk to pluck her house up whole into the vortex. To that one, Elemental, merciless in its intensity, which scours out the prairie, bringing her to desperation. To this one, welcome breath of freshening after a long, confining season in the cold and dark. It stirs and she throws open wide the doors and windows and allows it to lick all surfaces and change the air within. Then buttons all up tight again. Where is that one to whom I am no less a need than breathing, nor no more a threat than exhalation warm against her neck?
So unexpected.
You know, it's so, you're playing with a kind of a subgenre. It's in the song. It's in that song, that Sinatra song, you know, when I was 21, you know.
Yeah. September. Yeah.
Neruda does that. He has a whole section in Isla Negra, and they're like odes to various women, but it's all a piece, you know. But in both of those, it's the women that change, you know. Well, except in this one, it's the speaker who changes, or else the women change the speaker. Each one of them changes the speaker. The lovers.
But there are a bunch of women.
Yes, there are. So that does belong to that genre of like, but what happens is very different. The others always say something about what happens to how the women are different. But this one is what happens to that, and you know, it's no surprise that someone who has spent a lifetime in your other art of playing, you know, playing the horn, that you should be the wind all the way through this, you know. Because that's where so much of your expression has to do with wind, you know.
Yeah, that's true. I had not thought of that, but that's very, very much the case. I do play a wind instrument. I did steal one of these from the Victor Seastrom silent film, The Wind, which was made in 1922 and starred Lillian Gish. It's a great, great, great film. Seastrom was Swedish, but of course it was a silent film, so there was no impediment to it being marketed in America. And in it, Lillian Gish arrives in the prairies of the Midwest by train, and she's come to live with her sister and her husband. And the whole film is dominated by these relentless scouring winds. It's scouring out the prairie. Wow. And the wind never abates. It never slackens. And so, of course, it affects everyone, and it drives them all to distraction, to desperation, as they say in the poem. And it's a very, very powerful film because, of course, you don't hear any words. You also don't really even hear the wind unless you've got a version that's got a soundtrack. But you see the results. And at one point, Lillian Gish has to kill the brother who's trying to rape her. And she drags him out of the house and just barely gets back in. And within a matter of minutes, the sand has completely covered over the body of the. This is that's why the word elemental comes in the poem. That it's merciless and driving her to desperation. So yeah, that's he is as the wind. But yeah, again, to go back to what we were saying earlier, I could have given a list of women and said, here's what happened with each one of them. And I could have reported it, and it would have been very uninteresting.
A person giving the reader knowledge into the changes in himself is more interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because
Yeah.
you're going out of yourself, turning around and looking back.
Well, I had a running statement that I used occasionally as to be serious and occasionally not to be serious. But that was, with a different woman, you're a different man.
All right, yeah.
And that's what's reflected in this poem. Of course, it's also completely untrue, but it's also true.
Yeah. I got it. That's true. Yeah.
So
Poetry incredible. It can tell the truth and lie at the same time. It can say yes and no at the same time.
yeah.
Hate you and
Well, to go back to physics, and there is a deep connection between physics and poetry, and there have been books written about it. But Niels Bohr, one of the greatest of physicists who developed the quantum theory in the 20s, he has a great quote about truth. He says, a profound truth is a truth whose opposite is also a truth.
Wow. Wow.
And that was a physicist who said that.
Wow.
We should be fortunate he didn't decide to be a poet.
Poetry is the only form of literature that routinely tells the truth and lies at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do that because our feelings are not as faithful. They're not as cut and dry as some people like to believe they are.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, I contain multitudes, like that guy said.
Yeah, he knew what he was talking about.
He did. All right, last round.
Okay,
last round. What's your final word going to be, Ms. Espaillat?
My final word is workshop.
Yes.
Well, we got to get you in there.
Yeah, this is a workshop that I was invited to by an old friend who was going and said, come on, you haven't been to any place. Just put the stuff in the kitchen away and come out. I'm going tonight. So I said, okay, I'll go. So I went and I was lured back into the routine of attending workshops and so forth, because I was bringing up little boys and taking care of a husband and a sick mother and all the rest of that. Where have you been, says my old friend, the poet, and what have you been doing? The question weighs and measures me like an unpaid bill, hangs in the air, waiting for some remittance. Well, I've been coring apples, layering them in raisins and brown sugar. I've been finding what's always lost, mending and brushing, pruning houseplants, remembering birthdays. The wisdom of others thunders past me like sonic booming. What I know of the world fits easily in the palm of one hand and lies quietly there like a child's cheek. Spoon-fed to me each evening, history puts on my children's faces because they are the one alphabet all of me reads. I've been setting the table for the dead, rehearsing the absence of the living, seasoning age with names for the unborn. I've been putting a life together, like supper, like a poem with what I have.
Mm.
It's an amazing poem, because you have, in the context of Rhina's, life, she's, I remember going to parties where that very, what do you do? It's the most terrifying thing in the world, because, so this very well-meaning, so what have you been doing? Well, you have to remember that she was a phenomenon, a teen phenomenon. She She's the youngest person ever elected to the admitted to the Poetry Society of America, the youngest person ever. Then she's championed by Alfred Dorn. She's anthologized by W.H. Auden. She's big time when she's very little, right? And so now she's in a position where she's got the kids and she's out of the scene, right? And someone's inviting her back into the scene. How scary is that? And how, I mean, that's just she's in a frightening place. So this poem begins as self-defense, right? Self-defense, defending the ego against, it's a pretty darn fragile ego at that point. And it ends as an ars poetica. I've been putting a life together, like supper, like a poem, with what I have. And then you go back and you reread everything in here. It's just exactly the kind of things that you draw on, or that Rhina draws on for her poems. All of this is all the stuff that she draws on for her poems. It's an amazing.
Well, Salemi got me for that one.
Yeah.
He wanted to shoot me on Fifth Avenue for that one. She's
domestic.
Domestic, yeah, right. Yeah. I said thank you.
Wasn't okay. It's the one thing is the women of your generation are the ones that blazed that trail, that said that it was okay to write about the things that people do with their lives in their homes. The only man I've ever heard, because that accusation has been hurled at you, it's hurled at Linda Paston, been hurled at a lot of women poets. The only man poet I ever heard it hurled at was Robert Creeley. Someone tried to call him a domestic poet.
Yeah?
Yeah.
How did he react?
I don't know. He probably smoked another bone. I don't know. Who knows? I don't think he took it too.
Yeah. Well, I was grateful for the context that you gave before you read the poem, that it was inspired at a point where you had been conducting your life in the life spheres, but you had not been writing.
No, I had not, because I had a lot to do. I was working on the master's degree so I could get my teaching license. And then I went into the classroom and had spent every night making paper, grading papers. And
I've been there. I know what it's like.
You know exactly what I'm talking about. And I never did find housework a punishment. I found it a normal life. I mean, this is what we do. We feed people. We remember their birthdays. We do whatever's necessary in the house.
Yes. Well, but and keeping in mind what Alf just said about how this is the substance on which on which you thrive in your work. What's also going on there for me is it's a call to a reemergence. But you reemerge in the poem in which you talk about because by the time you get to the end, this could only have been written by a poet in full command of her powers. So it's not like you were knocking rust off, right?
Yeah. That's true. That's absolutely true.
It's like it was going, and so this is something, I wrote a whole play about this in verse, no less. That's why no one's ever heard it.
You've got to put it where people can hear it.
Well, it's a stage play that creates a problem. But at any rate, it's about a guy who's lived from the external to the external observer a solid burger's existence. He's got a wife and two daughters, and he's worked in business, and he's in his 50s, and the daughters are mostly grown. And he's in an accident, and he's in a coma, and so the fellow's on stage in a coma for the entire play, and nobody knows whether he can hear what's said to him or not. And so you get the whole domestic story, And then near the end of the first act, it's in 3 acts, this young man appears who says, I am the son, this man's son, from a relationship he had in England when he was a young man studying to be a composer. And the mother and the daughters go, what? What are you talking about? We know this guy. There's no way he was a composer. Well, the young man shows up and he's got a manuscript, and they look at the handwriting, and that's him. And so the question that the play asks is, put simply, is life sequential or cumulative?
Mm-hmm. Mm.
So what you show in this poem, and what I try to propose in the play, is that if you live properly, it's cumulative. So that when you came back to writing, you weren't impoverished by the life you had led. You were enriched. And you were more capable because you had lived more. And as artists, we work from our lives, from our experience. And so actually, the way it turns out in the play is the manuscript that the son shows is an uncompleted string quartet. And you never know, the family doesn't know whether this guy has heard all of this tumult that's gone on about him. But at the end of the play, this is kind of like the bear finally gets to tell his tales. In the theater, we hear the voice of the man in the coma, and he tells his story. And he poses this question to himself. I consciously closed the door on my creative identity. I didn't nourish it. I didn't do the work. I tried to put it behind me. I lived for my family, and I did that for the whole balance of my life up to this point. If I decide that I wanted to open that door up again and step through it, am I the person that I was, or did I destroy that? And at the end of the play, you hear the final movement of the string quartet, that in his coma, he writes it. No one on stage knows that he's completed this work and shown that his life is an accumulation. No one knows it but the audience.
Mm.
So that's the play that nobody's seen. One of them. I have a couple.
That's worth putting on stage.
Yeah.
Well, but it's a long story. But at any rate, anyone listening, talk to me. I mean, basically, life in the theater is a whole other pursuit, and it would have taken me a different lifetime to make the connections I would have needed to make this a real possibility. If you see what I'm saying, my connections are in the music world, and now I know a lot of poets over the last 15 years, but I did not keep up my theater connections, and so anyway. But to come back to your poem, for me, that's what your poem shows, is you were still you, and you were a deeper version of you for having lived all that time without using that particular voice. It didn't go away. It's still yours.
I like cooking. I like feeding people.
And you can do that too.
Raising children. I love raising kids. It's all those things strike me as every bit as interesting as writing.
Well, yeah, they also help keep the race going. They're important.
That is a very, very nice piece of work to do. And
yes.
Not only that, but you retain what you lived if you write it.
Yes. Yeah. And I talk about that a lot, the process of re-experiencing. And that's why I write so many memory-based poems, because I want to go there. I want to live there again for a little while I'm trying to recreate it.
But you know, your music does that too, because
yes.
as I get up and dance to your music when I'm alone in the living room, I think, this is a life that I'm hearing. And this is the person he's talking to, and she was alive and she was real. and so forth. And you can hear the source of the work, whatever the work is.
Well, thank you, because that's, as you know, that's something we're all shooting for.
Yeah.
For sure. All right. Well, so let's close out let's go to your last poem, sir, and then I will bring up the rear.
Okay, I'd better shut this door. I think we're going to have some people going to come in a minute, and that's going to make Parker bark. Parker's going to have another barking fit. Hopefully, I'll get through this poem for that.
Word against Parker.
It's called Nuts.
Yes.
I come in contact with a lot of nuts. Poetry readings, church, the library, they're always there. Lost souls end up in ruts like everybody else. I often see a man whose armload of biographies that codger won't live long enough to read, fumbling for change to pay his past due fees on other lives. How many does he need? He's lost his place in his own story. One thin volume more than he can carry home. Library quiet, fording the Echeron. And then there are the ruts that lead to Rome. The crazies go to mass on Sunday too. I've noticed torture going on. One fellow brings the Inquisition to his pew. His hair is matted, black. His eyes are yellow. No sign of peace. He won't let you come near. His forehead's beaded from the fires he's fanning. Bloodstorms, paroxysms of guilt. I fear his awful sin may be the one he's planning. And poetry. Perhaps I shouldn't say. The open mic's a magnet for the daft. Trembling hand, a mangled, stiff cliche. Time is a river. The podium's a raft that poets grip, riding the floodwaters. Let the full winds blow. Struggling poets row against the swells, bedraggled, cold, and wet. Forgive them, for they know not where they go. I love that poem. You've got it. You've got it.
That's delicious.
It's
You
cool.
actually,
That's cool, but I forgive myself because this is true. All three of the groups that I'm making fun of, I belong to.
yes. But, you actually managed to you transmuted what are sometimes painful moments at readings into something delightful.
Oh,
You got these poets on the raft being swept down the river. I mean, now I have something I can think of in those moments when I'm trying to keep my eyes up.
I'm telling you, and I used to I used to go to the open mic after the Powow River readings, when I was first, and I literally, this is what I looked like. My hand was literally doing this. You could see the freaking pages rattling. That's how it's frightening.
It's incredible, incredible. And he does the same thing when he reads now. It's as if he's not the best one in the group, and we all know. We all know.
Well, much better than the opposite attitude.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, the opposite is unbearable.
It's
unbearable
unbearable
because there are people who read like this.
I know.
They're so deep. They're so deep. You wish they were deeper.
Well,
could you go deeper, please?
This is not a small virtue, but I would point out that the way that you just read that poem has absolutely you crossed over the threshold between now I'm saying a poem into I'm just talking to you.
Oh, yeah.
If you understand what I'm saying. In other words, this is not a performance. This is just reality. And of course, what actors hope for is to progress from this is a performance beyond that to no, this is just reality. This is life. Like Spencer Tracy said, never let them catch you acting. And so, but you had such authority reading that poem. It was. I'm glad that we're recording it because you should go back and watch yourself sometime. It was really masterly.
Hilarious and true, every word of it.
Well, that's where the authority comes from, is that he's convinced. He knows what he's talking about. And so do we, alas. Well, you've certainly got us on your side. You have our sympathy.
Oh, this has been so much fun.
Yes. I'm going to have the final word. It won't take too long. But, and you have heard me, I believe you've heard me read this at a Powow open mic, actually, not too long ago, because it's quite new. It's only a few months old, this poem. And it's called Outside of Time. And in a way, it's kind of a fusion of my, of religious sentiments about life and the afterlife and scientific propositions about the nature of time and time as a dimension, time as this, time as that. It kind of covers both simultaneously. Outside of time, the game could not begin. There was no game as yet with all the pieces in the box. And all was one, and you and I were one, and were not, both at once the same. There was no time, neither before nor after. Presence and absence also were the same. Here was in no way different from there. To be and not to be, no difference. Opposites, there were no opposites. Light and darkness were not separated. Outside of time, there could be no beginning. Ending and beginning are the same. So you and I were one and not apart. So shall we be outside of time again.
Oh, that's another hopeful one.
Hopeful, yes.
You know, I wrote on my copy of it, maybe the loneliest love poem ever written.
Wow.
Because
Jay.
the funny thing, you know, and then I also wrote underneath it, Earth's the right place for love, you know, with Frost, because
Yes.
people, these lovers, they're going to be together outside of, they're going to be not, they have to leave the earth to be together, you know, and but Frost said I'd like to leave this earth for a little while, but I want to come back. You know, this, you know, his birches on the birches poem.
We all want to come back
because Earth's the right place for love, but this one, it takes these lovers, they have to, they we're gonna be they'll be one, but it won't be here. Yikes!
Right.
Yikes.
Right.
Realist. He's a realist.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, but I would invite you to speculate just a little further into the nature of existence in time and the nature of existence outside of time. And to go along with this, the quote that I had in mind is outside of time, where will we exist?
Right.
I guess in the love of others.
Well, you can answer it a number of ways. Now, I'm not indicating which way to answer it, but you could, but maybe it's just a different nature. Maybe the nature, once you do away with time, tyrannous, overweening time, maybe there's something else that is not time. That's why all this language of, here and there, there's no difference.
Your Einstein book would have said, because Einstein said, I just copied
Yeah.
this down recently. He said the past, present, and future
Yes.
are
Only a kind of persistent illusion.
Yeah, he says that it's an illusion, though it's a very persistent one, something like that.
Oh, yeah.
He used that word persistent and he used illusion, but I'm not getting
Yes. I mean, all those quotes are in the back of my mind before this gets written.
Yeah.
But yeah. Another thing that he said once was, what did he say? He said, time is nature's way of keeping everything from happening at once.
Right. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
That's a good, funny one. But the other one is a radical.
I know. It's marvelous. And somebody, I don't remember now, some scientist, I think, said that light possibly carries events out into space infinitely.
Yes.
Because light can carry what it sees, what it illuminates, what it is.
You would be keen in on that because of your relationship to photographs.
The photographs, that's right. But it's like photographs, because I wrote a poem about how I'm going to jump on the beam of light that is traveling out into space, and I'm going to find it in such a way that it will start where I get married. And that way I can hang out with Alfred forever.
That's pretty good.
But it ends with saying, no, I'm just daydreaming.
Well,
and then you'll be in the marriage and the thing, and they'll say, "Do you take this till death do you part?" Hell no, we ain't gonna be no death parting.
We did that. Did that at once. Once was enough.
Well, this gets you thinking and talking about it, and my work is done. So
thank you so much for making this happen.
Well, I appreciate. Thanks for going to get the
old lady,
number one guest, and bringing her. And when we do the second version of this, where we read our favorites by other people, maybe we could do this again this way to have you two together.
We should, just so that we can.
I like it better this way.
Isn't it nice this way?
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
I like it very much.
It would be best if I could be there too, but since I can't.
Well,
yeah. Well, great. All right. So let me, I will make my farewells, but this was everything I hoped and expected it would be. Knowing you two, you could hardly not be wonderful.
You found that, but you have learned something new about me, that I'm really from the 10th century.
Wow. Well,
you're just riding the boom.
Yeah. Take care of yourself.
Yes, I will. And I love you both. And I hope we meet again very soon and continue this in what to me is going to be a very interesting direction, because we will not only pick work by people not ourselves, but we will also pick favorite work by each other.
Yes, that's going to be fun.
Yeah.
I get to.
So this is sending me back to read the books that I own by both of you, and so that's a great lot of reading to look forward to.
I had a blast reading through your work, I'll tell you that. But the one you read today wasn't in the in the books I read. So,
well, the one that I just read,
it's in the other one. It's in this one.
It's too new.
Can't use that.
It's
because
probably in
you
this
just-
one.
That's the first one.
Oh yeah, yeah. No, I mean the one about the stories, the Scopa poem. That was beautiful. All right.
Yeah, I think that's in the first one.
In this
All
one.
right. Well, so
I remember it.
Bye-bye.
yes. Farewell.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye.
So long.